Okay, so what we want to look at now then is this idea of controlling the bureaucracy. If you have 2.5 million people that work in the bureaucracy, I'm going to venture to guess that most of them never meet the president. Never see the president beyond like you and I see him on TV or her on TV. Rarely will they interact with Congress any more than you and I will, unless they're high-ranking people. So regular, like everyday bureaucrats don't get to do that. So there's a lot of, like you said, like there's a lot of kind of things like spread out, and so sometimes it's hard to control the direction of the bureaucracy. And so we have situations where all the different parts of the government are trying to influence them. So here's some examples of ways that Congress can try to control the bureaucracy. Even though the president is their boss and they answer to the president, the Congress, through their system, can try to figure out ways to influence. So the first way would be right here. Congress actually creates, except for the EOP, Congress structures them. So I gave you the example earlier about Homeland Security. Congress did that. They said, this needs to be a cabinet position, and we want the FBI to be part of them, and we want the CIA to be part of them, and they like put all of these specific efforts there. This is huge, the budget, because Congress holds the purse strings. And we talked about it earlier, where how Congress has to, or sorry, the cabinet has to, the bureaucratic agencies have to report to OMB what they want, but they also have to report to the legislature, and then the legislature can use their oversight power to check up on how they're spending or how they're implementing law. And, you know, they can have those hearings. So give me some historic examples of oversight that you guys know, because you studied these. Go ahead, David. Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. Well, too bad. Go ahead. So what are some, like, oversight things historically, like big ones? Watergate. Thanks, Tina. What else? Okay, that was an impeachment trial, yeah, but that was kind of oversight. Iran-Contra, you guys learned about that, like that happened back in the 80s. The McCarthy hearings. But understand, like, this happens frequently. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal. Like 2 or 3 years ago, there was a big investigation into the Department of Justice arming people in Mexico in the drug war, and it was like this fast and furious investigation that they had. There's recently been one with Hillary Clinton in Benghazi, and about the shooting at the embassy and the ambassador that was killed. So they do that all the time, so that's a way for them to check up on them. Okay? Congress passes statutes. That word statute means law, okay? So they literally write the law that the bureaucrats have to enforce. That's pretty powerful, right? Because they're basically saying this is what we want you to do. And then over here, Congress uses for many of the agencies, the regulatory and all the cabinet positions, the Senate gets to influence that person, and they don't just automatically approve who the president nominates. There are many times that a presidential nominee might not go through. Okay? All right, so on the next slide then we want to look at this idea of how does the president control the bureaucracy? Yeah, he's their boss, but that doesn't mean it's easy for him to control them. So we talked about last time that the president just automatically gets this audience, and so he can use the bully pulpit, his access to the media, and the institution of his office to exert authority over them, and to basically say, look, don't go rogue. You know, if you are Secretary of State and you disagree with me, we better do that behind closed doors and sort this out. Don't you dare try to usurp my power, because ultimately, I'm the president, and I'm the one that has that power. You are appointed by me. I am your boss. And again, presidents can use that as they choose. The president can issue executive orders. So this is the one we looked at the example where there have been like 15,000 of them on record. An executive order, remember, is like a law, carries the weight of law, but it's not a law, so it's a decree. Well, that's a direct order to the bureaucracy, because those are the people who are enforcing it. So you're saying, bureaucrat, do this, and then they're the ones that have to follow it. The president gets to make appointments, so he gets to decide who the Secretary of State is, who the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Director of the Federal Reserve, and he is very likely to still use patronage. Okay, so this can be kind of confusing, because your textbook tells you that patronage, like we've done away with that. We've done away with patronage in the sense of appointing people who have bought their job. We're not giving people jobs as favors necessarily, But wouldn't you hire your friend? Like, wouldn't you, if you got a cool job and you were the boss, wouldn't you want to surround yourself with people that you knew, people that you had liked, people that were supportive? That's all they do. And you can kind of go, like, in this era of divided government, like, if you go over the last 20 years, you can see that there are many people who have served in the Democratic administrations and then taken a break when we had a Republican, and common for the Republican as well. So it's kind of like in and out of that public life, because we're going to appoint people that we know what their track record is and what they're doing. Okay. All right, finally, the court has oversight as well. Okay. The court's oversight is not as direct. It can only come through lawsuits, right? So the court can't just say, ooh, we don't like what you're doing. But if bureaucrats aren't enforcing law in a way that kind of meshes with the law and there's a lawsuit filed, then the court can exercise judicial review over them. You know, just like we could do that over a school. You know, like if there's something unconstitutional going on in a school and Andrew decides he wants to file a lawsuit and the court takes that up, then they are using the power of judicial review to check the school system. Well, that's checking the bureaucracy. So the reality is that all three parts of our government actually do have the opportunity to oversee the bureaucracy and check on them. So bureaucrats are answering a lot of masters at the same time. Alrighty? Alright, flip your paper over and we're going to talk about this question together. Question 4 asks you, in what ways is the bureaucracy quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial? That word means kind of. So bureaucrats enforce the law. They are part of the executive branch. And yet, there are many ways that they act kind of like lawmakers and kind of like judges. So we want to try to kind of figure out why. So think about me as an example of a bureaucrat. Okay? Low-level bureaucrat enforcing FISD education policy, right? How are there things that I could do to kind of like not make law, but kind of make the law? Okay, so I set the class rules. Okay, so give me an example of a school district policy that I have kind of like formulated and created a rule. Fantastic, can you get in the way? Okay, and are there specific times where I say you have to put your phones away?
Yeah.
Like on test day, right? Okay, so that's not written into the rule, but because of how the rule is written, there is teacher discretion to decide specifically how to enforce that. So it makes me kind of like a lawmaker because I can take a general policy and I can say, okay, this is how I'm going to enforce it. This is what I think the law is. Okay, so then if you take that and you translate that into the federal government, what kind of laws allow bureaucrats to do more of this, to be more prescriptive about how they're going to enforce the law? Caleb, what kind of law would do that? Like, what kind of law would give a bureaucrat opportunity to kind of do it the way they want?
A law that doesn't describe how exactly they enforce it, like generally.
Yeah, things that are more generalized. So then you got to think about, well, why would Congress do that? Why would Congress write laws that are so general? Good. So maybe, there's a lot of reasons, you guys. Maybe they don't want to be blamed for something, so they shift and they deflect responsibility to the bureaucracy. Maybe that law is a result of years of compromise and that was the best they could do. Maybe they don't really know, and so they're allowing bureaucrats to use their expertise to enforce it the way they understand it or the way they see it. So there's a lot of ways like that, but I guess the key point is you have unelected people who are really having a lot of opportunity to enforce policy, and sometimes they end up like really determining direction of policy because of the general nature in which those laws are written. Okay, so could you take that same thing then, that same idea, and figure out like ways that a bureaucrat would be kind of like a judge? Okay, a police officer, good. That's a really good example. Can you mean?
So like whenever you set a speeding ticket, they can choose to either give it to you or not, based on like, as you said, their expertise.
Perfect. Yeah. They can make decisions. They can decide like how they're going to enforce that. If there's a dispute or a conflict, they get to resolve it on the spot. But again, it depends on the general nature, and sometimes it depends on the hierarchy of the bureaucracy. Have we empowered that street level bureaucrat or no? Okay? All right. Our last question. Why might some refer to the bureaucracy as a fourth branch of government? It is 100% not, and don't ever say that. But there's a lot of scholars that write about the bureaucracy, and they say, has it become like its own branch of government? Okay? I want you to take just a couple minutes and just jot down some reasons. Why might some people say, because of how bureaucracy has grown and changed, that it's now like its own fourth branch?